On Thursday, June 29th, we commemorate Saints Peter and Paul, the Holy Apostles. We also commemorate 11 years to the diaconate for my ordination. Regarding Saints Peter and Paul, the Holy Apostles, the divinely blessed Peter was from Bethesda of Galilee. He was the son of Jonas, and the brother of Andrew the first called. He was a fisherman by trade, unlearned and poor, and was called Simon. Later he was renamed Peter by Jesus Christ himself, who looked at him and said, "Thou art Simon the son of Jonas. Thou shalt be called Cephas," which is interpreted Peter. On being raised by the Lord to the dignity of an apostle and becoming inseparable from him as his zealous disciple, he followed him from the beginning of his preaching of salvation up until the very passion, where in the court of Caiaphas the high priest he denied him thrice because of his fear of the Jews and of the danger at hand. But again, after many bitter tears, he received complete forgiveness of his transgression. After the resurrection of Christ and the descent of the Holy Spirit, he preached in Judea, Antioch, and certain parts of Asia, and finally came to Rome, where he was crucified upside down by Nero. And thus he ascended to the eternal habitation about the year 66, leaving 2 Catholic universal epistles to the Church of Christ. St. Paul, the chosen vessel of Christ, the glory of the Church, the apostle of the nations and teacher of the whole world, was a Jew by race, of the tribe of Benjamin. Having Tarsus as his homeland, he was a Roman citizen, fluent in Greek, an expert in the knowledge of the law, a Pharisee, born of a Pharisee, and a disciple of Gamaliel, a Pharisee and notable teacher of the law in Jerusalem. This was like the Stephen Hawking of lawyers, by the way, Gamaliel. So Paul had immense pedigree. For this cause, from the beginning, Paul was a most fervent zealot for the traditions of the Jews, and a great persecutor of the Church of Christ. So at the time his name was Saul. In his great passion of rage and fury against the disciples of the Lord, he went to Damascus bearing letters of introduction from the high priest. His intention was to bring the disciples of Christ back to Jerusalem in bonds. As he was approaching Damascus, about midday, there suddenly shone upon him a light from heaven. Falling on the earth, he heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And he asked, "Who are you, Lord?" And the Lord said, "I am Jesus, whom you persecute. It is hard for you to kick against the pricks." The pricks, or the goads, is the spikes on when plows are being used to till the land during the time of Christ. There were spikes on them, these pricks, the goads, and so it's painful, the idea of kicking those. You're essentially kicking against spikes. And that heavenly voice and brilliance made him tremble, and he was blinded for a time. He was led by the hand into the city on account of divine revelation to the apostle Ananias. He was baptized by him, and both his bodily and spiritual eyes were opened to the knowledge of the Son of Righteousness. And straightway a wondrous transformation, beyond all expectation. He spoke with boldness in the synagogues, proclaiming that Christ is the Son of God. As for his zeal in preaching the gospel after these things had come to pass, as for his unbating labors and afflictions of diverse kinds, the wounds, the prisons, the bonds, the beatings, the stonings, the shipwrecks, the journeys, the perils on land, on sea, in cities, in wilderness, the continual vigils, the daily fasting, the hunger, the thirst, the nakedness, and all those other things that he endured for the name of Christ, and which he underwent before nations and kings and the Israelites, and above all, his care for all the churches, his fiery longing for the salvation of all, whereby he became all things to all men, that he might save them all, if possible. And because of which, with his heart aflame, he continuously traveled throughout all parts, visiting them all, and like a bird of heaven, flying from Asia and Europe, the west and east, neither staying nor abiding in any one place. All these things are related incident by incident in the book of the Acts, and as he himself tells us in his epistles being 14 in number are explained in 250 homilies by the divine Chrysostom, and make manifest the loftiness of his thoughts, the abundance of the revelations made to him, the wisdom given to him from God, wherewith he brings together in the wondrous manner the Old with the New Testaments, and expounds the mysteries thereof, which had been concealed under types. He He confirms the doctrines of faith, expounds the ethical teachings of the gospel, and demonstrates with exactness the duties incumbent upon every rank, age, and order of man. In all these things his teachings proved to be a spiritual trumpet, and his speech was seen to be more radiant than the sun, and by these means he clearly sounded forth the word of truth and illumined the ends of the world. Having completed the work of his ministry, he likewise ended his life in martyrdom when he was beheaded in Rome during the reign of Nero, at the same time, some say, when Peter was crucified. First in prominence among the apostles and teachers to the universe, intercede to the Master of all for peace in the world, for our souls' great mercy. O Lord, receive under the enjoyment of your good things and your rest the steadfast preachers of godly words, the pinnacle of your disciples. Receive their pain and death above every sacrifice, for you alone know the hearts of men. So important is this feast that after the week of Pentecost, from the Sunday of All Saints forward until this feast is a fasting period of the church. The fast of the Holy Apostles, which ends on this great feast. This feast is often shown with the disciples, the apostles, Peter and Paul embracing one another. Now the reason why they're embracing is, this is seen throughout Acts of the Apostles and in the letters of St. Paul, is that St. Peter was falling prey to one of the first heresies within the church, the Judaizers, who were saying that in order to become Christian, first you must become a Jew. So in other words, first you must be circumcised before you can be baptized. Paul utterly rejected this. Peter should have as well, because he was the one that was given the revelation to bring the Gentiles in when he brought Cornelius into the church, the first Gentile Christian. But Peter was persuaded by the Judaizers. Because of this, there was division in the church. So they brought everything to Jerusalem, to the brother of the Lord, Iacovos, who was the first bishop of Jerusalem, and they convened a council. So this was the very first question that came up in the church, and it shows us how the church dealt with problems, dealt with questions about who and what is Christ and what the church is. And it is significant that after this discussion and the truth became known, it was Peter, as the leader of the disciples, who came forward and declared for all that no, Christians do not need to be Jews first. They need to be baptized by faith. And that is how they will be entered into the church. And so there could have been a moment of contention between Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, and Peter, the chief of the disciples, but there wasn't. They embraced one another. This is very, very important. This is also one of the reasons why the Orthodox repudiate the idea of the Pope having infallibility, even ex cathedra, because Peter, who is the leader of the disciples, the chief of all the apostles, was wrong and was teaching this. And it is only when he came to the council, when the church came together as one, that the truth became manifest. And we see why Peter is the greatest of the apostles, because he repented, he changed, he accepted the truth, and used that. The readings are according to the feast. From St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians. Brethren, what anyone dares to boast of, I'm speaking as a fool. I also dare to boast of that. This is St. Paul standing up for himself, because people are questioning his authority. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they descendants of Abraham? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I am a better one. Now that might sound arrogant, but he is about to show why this is true, and why those that are causing disruption in the church of Corinth are causing harm. It says, I am talking like a madman, with far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings, often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews the 40 lashes less one. Now the 40 lashes less one was the idea that after being beaten with essentially a cat of 9 tails, the idea was that if you went to 40, you'd kill the person, certainly. They'd always die. But if you did 39, they'll survive. The truth is, many people died long before they got to the 39. He endured that 5 times. 3 times I have been beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I have been shipwrecked. At night and at day I have been adrift at sea, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles. Now remember, his own people, he is an Israelite, a disciple of Gamaliel. So he should have been in the upper tiers of Israelites. Danger from the Gentiles. He's from Sicily. He's a Roman by birth. People would pay big money to become a Roman citizen. He has that from birth. That's one of the reasons why he is able to travel and do the things that he does, because he also is a Roman citizen. And they could not just kill a Roman citizen, even though they wanted to. Danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brethren, in toil, in hardships, though many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. And apart from other things, there's the daily pressure upon me of my anxiety for all the churches. Now this again shows the humanity of the saints. He's anxious. Even though he preaches and he tells us that we should put our trust in God and that we should be faithful to God and that it will be taken care of, he's so anxious. He's human. He's worried about people. And the reality is, all these other things that are hard, doesn't care about them as much as he cares about his anxiety for the children, as a father who loves them. And this is such a dichotomy from his earlier position as a persecutor of the church. If I must boast, who is weak, and I am not weak? Who is made to fall, and I am not indignant? In other words, I'm a sinner too. I have faults. If I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. The God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, he who is blessed forever, knows that I do not lie. At Damascus, the governor under King Aretas guarded the city of Damascus in order to seize me, but I was let down in a basket through a window in the wall and escaped his hands. I must boast. There's nothing to be gained from it, but I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. Now this next section is a literary artifice. He's talking about himself, but he's trying not to talk about himself. I know of a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether in body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. Now, when we're talking about the third heaven, we're talking about the layers of heaven, because there are layers. And when people say, well, what do you mean by layers? Think about this. In your own circle, you have your close-knit friends and family. You have your closer friends at work. You have your acquaintances at work. You have the people that you might see every 6 months. You have people that you will send a card to at Christmas time, but you don't think about them any other time, and then so forth and so on. So there are degrees of separation. So when he says he was caught up to the third heaven, it means that he was brought directly before the throne of God, the closest place where all of the most close saints of God are present. Now for myself, if I can get even to the outer rim of paradise and be able to sweep the streets, I'll be happy. And I know that this man was caught up into paradise. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And he heard things that cannot be told, which man may not utter. On behalf of this man, I will boast. But on my own behalf, I will not boast, except of my weakness. So this is something the saints show us, that we must never boast in the miracles that happen to us. We can talk about other people's miracles. Or in this case, he's talking about his own self, but he's using it as if it was someone else. But we talk about our weakness. The reason because of that is because Christ's power is made manifest in our weakness. His glory is made through our weakness. Though if I wish to boast, I shall not be a fool, for I shall be speaking the truth. But I refrain from it, so that no one may think more of me than he sees in me or hears from me. And to keep me from being too elated by the abundance of revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I besought the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Now there are many theologians that debate what this thorn is. One of the popular theories that I've heard is that the thorn is his guilt over killing the Christians. And most especially, according to some theologians, that at the very first stoning, the stoning of Stephen, the protomartyr, that he feels especially guilty The robes were laid at the foot of Saul. He was present, and he gave the go-ahead to kill Stephen. Now, according to some traditions, Stephen was St. Paul's sister's son, meaning that this was his nephew. This was somebody that was beloved to him, known to him, and yet he felt no qualms about killing him, and would go on to kill other people. And so you can imagine how this might be a guilt that Paul is hounded by, feels great remorse for, that he now, who is a servant of the Gentiles, a great follower of Christ, that he was responsible for the very first blood shed for Christ, and it was his child, his sister's child. This is something that would be agony. But Christ said, "My grace is sufficient. My power is made perfect in weakness. I will all the more gladly boast of my weaknesses, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." So in other words, we recognize we can do nothing. We don't have the power. We are weak, but Christ is great, and he is the one that works all healing. Now, going to the Matins Gospel, we'll start with the Liturgy Gospel. Gospel according to St. Matthew. At that time, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea and Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do men say that the Son of Man is?" In other words, the Son of Man is the epithet that Christ uses more than any other. He doesn't say, "Who do they say is the Son of God, or the Lord, or the Christ?" The Son of Man. And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. I tell you, you are Peter." Peter means rock. "And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, hell, shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." This is showing us that the authority of the church gives us the ability to forgive sins. This is why confession is so important. Now, the reason why I did the Gospel of the Liturgy first and the Matins second is because the Matins Gospel, the Gospel of Orthodox, is Jesus Christ redeeming Peter after his denial. So even though Peter said these things and declared these things, and Christ made this declaration of who Peter is and what he will do for the church, Peter still denied Christ. And so this is how Peter is redeemed after his triple denial. From the Gospel according to St. John. At that time, Jesus revealed himself to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. And he said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Meaning agape. Do you have selfless love for me? And do you love me only because I raised from the dead? He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." But Peter doesn't use agape, he uses philo, because he's denied Christ. He doesn't have selfless love. So Christ shows him how to gain that. He said to him, "Feed my lambs." The lambs being the church. Feed them. Give them food. They're starving. Second time he said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Again, Christ uses the word agape, selfless love. He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." But Peter still says philo, because he knows that it is not sufficient. He says to him, "Tend my sheep." Keep them in order. Keep the church in order. This is how you will gain selfless love. He said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" But this time, Jesus Christ changes the verb. He does not use agape, he uses philo. Friendly love. The same kind of love that Peter has been saying. Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" So in other words, Peter's not upset that he is being redeemed in this way. He's not upset that Christ is asking him, "Do you love me?" and asking 3 times. He is upset because his failure was so great that Christ had to lower the bar for him. Now, Christ is showing him how he's going to not only achieve the bar, but go beyond the bar. He said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And again, he uses the word philo. But by saying you know everything, in other words, you know I can't say it. You know my sins. You know my weakness. I love you, but I'm a failure. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. In other words, I don't care that you're a failure. I love you. You are Peter, and I will use you. And just as we saw in St. Paul, it is through this weakness that Christ's power is made manifest. Peter tried to grandiose himself. He's declared, even if everyone leaves you, I won't leave you. That I will somehow force myself to be better than everyone. But he didn't. He failed. But Christ uses our weakness. Truly, truly I say to you, when you were young, you girded yourself and walked where you would. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you do not wish to go. So in other words, Peter is going to be crucified. This he said to show by what death he was to glorify God. And after this he said to him, follow me. By denying yourself, by feeding the sheep, you will follow me. Peter turned and saw following them the disciple whom Jesus loved, who had lain close to his breast at the supper, and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? When Peter saw him, that is John the theologian, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? What about John? Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Follow me. In other words, it doesn't matter what Christ has planned for other people. The journey set before you, and only you, is what's important. The mission that God has for you. It may be different than other people's journey. It may be harder. It may be easier. There will be different times for humility in this journey. But it's your journey, not that person's journey, not her journey, not his journey. The saying spread abroad among the brethren that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? So stop worrying about other people. This is the disciple who is bearing witness to these things, and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. But there are also many other things which Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Amen. This is the conclusion of the Gospel of St. John, the redemption of Peter, and the beginning of the works of the disciples. For all who celebrate, all of the Paulinas, all of the Pauls, all of the Petros, all the Petrulas, Kronia Pola. I hope that you've enjoyed today's spiritual calisthenics. Have a blessed and wonderful day.